In the spring of 1992, a young man named Chris McCandless ventured deep into the Alaskan wilderness, driven by a desire that many before him have felt, a yearning to strip away the noise of modern life and test himself against the raw, unyielding power of nature. He walked along the Stampede Trail with only the essentials packed into a worn backpack, fueled by a vision of finding clarity, truth, and peace in solitude. 4 months later, McCandless's story would end tragically when his emaciated body was discovered in an abandoned bus, accompanied by an SOS note that spoke of desperation and the limits of his resilience. His fate would resonate across the world, sparking questions about what compels individuals to seek enlightenment by walking away from the comforts of civilization and embracing the unknown. The journey of Chris McCandless was chronicled and brought into the global spotlight by John Krakauer, a journalist and author who saw in McCandless's story echoes of his own youthful impulses and the age-old human drive for transcendence through solitude. Krakauer's book, Into the Wild, is more than just an account of McCandless's life. It is an exploration of the forces that lead some to seek answers outside the bounds of conventional society, testing their limits in the process. Born in 1968, McCandless grew up in an affluent household in Annandale, Virginia. He was bright, driven, and idealistic, a young man who excelled academically and charmed those around him with his wit and determination. Yet, beneath the surface, he harbored a deep discontent with what he perceived as the materialism and conformity of modern life. Inspired by the writings of Henry David Thoreau, Jack London, and Leo Tolstoy, McCandless yearned to live simply, without the trappings of wealth or obligation, and to reconnect with the essence of existence through nature. After graduating from Emory University in 1990, McCandless made a radical decision. He donated his life savings of $24,000 to charity, abandoned most of his possessions, and set out on a journey across the United States under the name Alexander Supertramp. Over the next 2 years, he traveled through the deserts of the Southwest, the wheat fields of the Midwest, and the rugged terrain of the Pacific Coast. He met people along the way who would remember him for his charisma, his intellect, and his intense conviction that life's truths were found not in comfort, but in challenge and solitude. McCandless's odyssey ultimately led him to Alaska, the final frontier that he believed would test him in a way nothing else could. His decision to venture into the Alaskan wilderness was not one taken lightly, but it was also marked by a youthful confidence that would prove costly. The wilderness, unforgiving and indifferent to human will, posed challenges that even the most prepared could not underestimate. McCandless's time in the wild was a mix of triumphs and harsh lessons. He documented his experiences in a journal, leaving behind a powerful narrative of his search for meaning, resilience, and the thin line between survival and surrender. When his story became public, it sparked debates and polarized opinions. Was Chris McCandless a bold adventurer who embodied the spirit of seeking a life less ordinary? Or was he an ill-prepared idealist who underestimated the ferocity of nature? John Krakauer's exploration of McCandless's journey Into the Wild delves into these questions, examining the psychological and philosophical underpinnings of why some individuals feel compelled to abandon society's safety and comfort to find themselves in the wilderness. Into the Wild is a story of longing, courage, and the allure of the unknown. It challenges us to think about the costs and rewards of searching for life's deeper meaning in places few dare to go. Through McCandless's journey, we are reminded of the thin line that separates adventure from folly, insight from obsession, and enlightenment from tragedy. His story, both inspirational and cautionary, continues to resonate with those who wonder what it means to truly live and seek out their place in the vast, unpredictable world. Chapter 1. The Life of Chris McCandless. Chris McCandless was born on February 12, 1968, in El Segundo, California, to Walt and Billy McCandless. From an early age, he displayed traits that hinted at the man he would become: intelligent, determined, and fiercely independent. The McCandless family was one of privilege, marked by financial stability and opportunity. Walt McCandless was a successful aerospace engineer who worked for NASA and later co-founded a consulting firm. Billy, Chris's mother, was known for her warmth and resilience. The family's achievements were well regarded, but behind the facade of their comfortable life, there were tensions that would shape Chris's outlook on the world. When Chris was young, his family moved to Annandale, Virginia, where he grew up with his younger sister, Corrine, with whom he shared a close bond. Chris was an exceptional student, both academically and athletically gifted. At W.T. Woodson High School, he excelled as a cross-country runner, a sport that suited his love for endurance and solitary reflection. His coaches and teammates noted his intensity and his drive to push himself past ordinary limits, seeing running not just as a sport, but as a test of his mental and physical boundaries. Chris's intensity extended beyond athletics. He was deeply introspective and had an affinity for literature that spoke to the human spirit and the rejection of societal norms. He read voraciously, consuming the works of authors like Jack London, who romanticized the wilderness and the rugged individualist; Leo Tolstoy, who spoke of spiritual awakening and renunciation of wealth; and Henry David Thoreau, whose Walden epitomized the pursuit of a simple, deliberate life. These influences stoked a growing sense of discontent within Chris, who began to see the materialism and conformity around him as barriers into living authentically. Despite his philosophical leanings, Chris excelled academically, and when the time came to attend college, he chose Emory University in Atlanta. At Emory, Chris majored in history and anthropology, two fields that reflected his fascination with the broader human experience and the quest for meaning. By all accounts, he was a standout student, graduating in 1990 with honors. But beneath the surface, Chris's dissatisfaction with conventional paths, career, wealth, societal approval, was deepening. While at Emory, Chris's relationships with his parents grew more strained. He resented what he perceived as their obsession with material success and their adherence to a lifestyle he found hollow. He also struggled with revelations about his father's past, including an affair that led to a second family. These personal conflicts only intensified his desire to distance himself from the trappings of his upbringing and find his own path, one free of hypocrisy and superficiality. Chris's journals and letters from this time reveal a young man consumed by questions about life's purpose and the pursuit of true freedom. He yearned to test himself, to strip life down to its bare essentials and find what truly mattered. To Chris, this meant leaving behind not just his possessions, but the expectations placed upon him. He wrote passionately about the beauty of living simply, inspired by Thoreau's idea that one should live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. In the summer of 1990, shortly after graduating, Chris made a decision that would change everything. He donated his entire savings, $24,000, to Oxfam, a charity dedicated to fighting hunger. He packed what few belongings he deemed necessary, abandoned his car, and set out on a journey across the United States under the alias Alexander Supertramp. This was not an impulsive decision. It was the culmination of years of contemplation, a definitive step toward what he saw as liberation from society's constraints. Chris's journey began with optimism and a clear vision. He explored the deserts of the Southwest, hiked the trails of California, and traveled as far as the Dakotas. Along the way, he took on odd jobs and connected with people who were struck by his intelligence, charm, and unwavering idealism. Wayne Westerberg, a grain elevator operator in South Dakota, became a friend and employer who later described Chris as hardworking, ethical, and passionate, albeit with a tendency to be secretive about his plans and background. Chris's encounters with people during his travels painted a picture of a man who was both fiercely independent and deeply empathetic. He shared stories and ideas with those he met, often leaving a strong impression. John Burris, a drifter who sold goods at flea markets, and her boyfriend Bob, recalled Chris's warmth and the way he spoke of his dreams with conviction. To many, Chris was more than just a traveler. He was someone who embodied the spirit of adventure and the pursuit of something greater than himself. Yet, even as he formed these connections, Chris kept moving, driven by an inner restlessness. His letters to friends hinted at his plans for Alaska, a place he saw as the ultimate test of his self-reliance and fortitude. "I now walk into the wild," he wrote, capturing both the excitement and the resolve that had defined his journey from the start. By the time Chris McCandless reached the Alaskan wilderness in April 1992, he had already lived a life full of experiences that most would consider extraordinary. He had cut ties with his past, journeyed through the American landscape, and delved deep into his personal philosophy of freedom and truth. But Alaska, with its raw, unyielding beauty, was the final chapter, the culmination of his quest for enlightenment and self-discovery. The life of Chris McCandless is not merely the story of a young man who left everything behind. It is the story of someone who sought to understand himself and the world in the most profound way possible. His journey invites us to ask what drives people to seek meaning beyond the boundaries of conventional life, and whether the risks they take in pursuit of that meaning are worth the price. Chapter 2. The Journey Across America. After leaving behind his old life and the name Chris McCandless, Alexander Supertramp set out on a journey that would span the breadth of the United States. It was the summer of 1990, and the open road stretched before him, a canvas of opportunity and challenge. For 2 years, Chris wandered across deserts, mountains, and plains, moving with a freedom that spoke to the core of who he was, a seeker of truth, a modern-day nomad rejecting the conventional path. Chris's travels took him deep into the American Southwest, where he explored the sun-scorched deserts of Arizona and New Mexico. Here, he felt at home in the stark, unyielding landscape. The vastness and solitude of the desert mirrored the space he sought within himself. He navigated the heat and dry winds with a confidence that belied his inexperience, finding joy in the simplicity of living off the land and camping under the stars. In this silence, Chris found moments of peace, writing about the exhilaration of being unbound and the raw beauty of the world around him. Chris's journey was not only physical, but also deeply spiritual. He carried with him a small collection of books that inspired him: Walden by Henry David Thoreau, The Call of the Wild by Jack London, and works by Leo Tolstoy. He read and reread these texts, drawing strength from their themes of solitude, self-reliance, and the rejection of societal norms. Thoreau's philosophy of simplifying life resonated with Chris's desire to shed the trappings of materialism, while London's tales of survival in unforgiving landscapes fueled his belief in the purity of life stripped to its essentials. Chris lived a life of minimalism, taking on the appearance of a wanderer with his threadbare clothes, a battered backpack, and a weathered journal in which he chronicled his thoughts and adventures. He refused to be tied down by possessions, carrying only what he deemed essential: a few books, rice, and basic camping gear. His journal entries revealed a mind that was both contemplative and restless, filled with musings about freedom, happiness, and the authenticity he believed could only be found in nature. During his travels, Chris met people who would become lasting figures in his story. In Carthage, South Dakota, he worked for Wayne Westerberg, a generous grain elevator operator who offered him both employment and friendship. To Wayne and his crew, Chris was more than just a transient laborer. He was a young man with sharp intelligence and a philosophical outlook that set him apart. Westerberg described Chris as hardworking and capable, with an unmistakable aura of determination. Chris's conversations with Wayne revealed his belief that modern society was stifling and shallow, and he often spoke of his dream to live in the wilderness, where he could test himself and seek a deeper truth. As Chris continued westward, he formed a bond with John Burris and her partner, Bob, a couple he met in the desert. Jan, who had a son about Chris's age, felt a maternal connection to him. She recalled how Chris would talk animatedly about his plans and the books he loved, his eyes bright with conviction. To Jan and Bob, he was not just another drifter. He was someone on a profound journey of discovery. Chris's time with them was marked by a blend of camaraderie and solitude. He would join them in selling goods at flea markets, but his heart remained tied to the road and the next horizon. Despite the friendships he made, Chris kept parts of himself hidden. He rarely spoke of his family or the life he had left behind, revealing only that he was on a path he felt compelled to follow. His letters to those he connected with were often filled with reflections on life's purpose, laced with quotes from Thoreau and Tolstoy. In one letter to Wayne Westerberg, he wrote, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all." Chris's journey took him through California, where he spent time hiking in the Sierra Nevada and venturing into the unforgiving Mojave Desert. The stark beauty of the landscape reinforced his belief that nature was a pure, untamed force that could cleanse the soul and strip away the distractions of modern life. Yet, these experiences were not without hardship. Chris often faced days of hunger, the challenge of finding clean water, and the harsh realities of weather and terrain. But these struggles were, to him, part of the test, a way to prove to himself that he could endure, that he could rely on nothing but his own skills and determination. One of the most significant chapters of Chris's journey unfolded as he made his way to Alaska. In letters and journal entries, he described his intention to make it to the northern wilderness, a place he saw as the ultimate test of his beliefs. Alaska represented a purity that few places could match, a land where he could shed the last remnants of civilization and live as a true Thoreauvian individual. He often spoke of it as the final chapter of his great adventure, the culmination of everything he had sought since leaving Annandale. But before reaching Alaska, Chris spent time preparing, working and saving in places like Bullhead City, Arizona, and camping in places that tested his resourcefulness. He studied plant identification and survival skills, although his preparation was, at times, inconsistent and marked by gaps in practical knowledge. His conviction was strong, but his reliance on books and limited experience raised questions about whether he truly grasped the dangers that awaited him in the unforgiving wilderness. Chris's encounters with people across America, from the kind strangers who offered food and shelter to those who shared in his philosophical musings, painted a picture of a young man driven by an unrelenting quest for meaning. His journey, fueled by idealism and a profound belief in the transformative power of nature, was both inspiring and filled with risk. Those who met him along the way remembered a man who was at once open and enigmatic, a traveler with deep convictions and a light that seemed to burn just a little brighter. As Chris McCandless neared the end of his journey, Alaska loomed large on the horizon, representing everything he had dreamed of. The raw, unfiltered experience of life, where survival was stripped to its essence and enlightenment was, he believed, within reach. His journey across America was a prelude to that final chapter, a series of trials and lessons that would prepare him for the wilderness that called to him, as it had called to many before him. Chapter 3. Into the Alaskan Wilderness. In April 1992, after months of wandering through deserts, mountains, and small towns across America, Chris McCandless finally reached the place that had haunted his imagination and driven his journey from the very start: the wilds of Alaska. To Chris, Alaska was not just a destination. It was a symbol of ultimate freedom and the testing ground for the ideals he had pursued so fiercely. The vast, untamed wilderness represented everything he craved. A life stripped of materialism, where he could live in harmony with nature, confronting solitude and self-reliance in their rawest forms. Chris's path led him to the Stampede Trail, an old mining route that cut through the Denali borough of Alaska. He hitchhiked with a truck driver named Jim Gallion, who would become the last person to see him alive. Gallion later recounted how Chris had spoken passionately about his plans to live off the land, exuding confidence but lacking the kind of practical equipment one might expect for such a journey. He carried with him only a 10-pound bag of rice, a rifle, a few books, basic camping gear, and a map that was less detailed than it should have been. Gallion, concerned about the young man's safety, tried to persuade him to take more supplies, even offering to buy him proper gear, but Chris declined. To him, the challenge was part of the experience. After sharing a brief conversation and giving Chris a pair of rubber boots to help with river crossings, Gallion dropped him off at the trail's entrance and watched as Chris disappeared into the wilderness. The heart of Chris's Alaskan experience was an abandoned bus, known as Bus 142, which had been left on the Stampede Trail by a construction company decades earlier. It served as a makeshift shelter for hunters and trappers who passed through the area. To Chris, the bus represented a home, a solitary fortress where he could live out his ideals. He carved out a routine that mirrored the simplicity he had always sought. In his journal, which he kept diligently, he recorded the days he spent gathering food, reading, and reflecting. His entries were often sparse, brief notations that captured both his joy and the growing challenges he faced. He read books by Tolstoy and Thoreau, finding kinship in their words and using them to reaffirm his purpose. At first, life in the wilderness brought Chris moments of triumph. He successfully hunted small game, such as squirrels and birds, and even managed to take down a porcupine and a moose. His elation at killing the moose, however, was short-lived. Lacking experience in preserving large game, he struggled to process the meat before it spoiled, leaving him with a profound sense of failure and regret. In his journal, he noted the waste with somber words, realizing that while he had proven his capability to hunt, his knowledge of sustainable survival was incomplete. The moose incident was a turning point, revealing the gap between romanticized ideals of wilderness living and its unforgiving reality. As days turned into weeks, Chris began to confront the harsher truths of his solitude. Summer in Alaska brought warmer weather, but it also came with challenges: dwindling food supplies, the persistence of insects, and the slow wear of isolation. He foraged for edible plants, adding roots and wild berries to his meals, but his lack of thorough knowledge about Alaskan flora introduced a new risk. One entry in his journal, scribbled with urgency, reflected this growing tension. Extremely weak. Fault of pot. Seed. The mystery of Chris's deteriorating health has been debated for years. John Krakauer's research suggests that Chris may have mistaken the seeds of a plant known as Hedysarum alpinum, wild potato, for its toxic cousin, or failed to recognize that even edible seeds could become dangerous when consumed in large quantities. Some theories propose that the seeds may have contained a toxic alkaloid that inhibited nutrient absorption, leading to starvation despite caloric intake. Whatever the precise cause, Chris's health began to decline rapidly, weakening him at a time when he most needed strength. In July, as his condition worsened, Chris faced another insurmountable challenge. The Teclanica River, which he had crossed easily in April, had swelled from the summer snowmelt, transforming into a powerful and impassable torrent. Trapped by the force of nature, he was unable to make his way back to safety. In his weakened state, the realization must have struck deep. The wilderness he had sought for peace and enlightenment now enclosed him, offering no way out. Chris's final journal entries reflect a somber awareness of his plight. His once enthusiastic notes grew sparse, marked by an almost clinical documentation of his condition and the struggle to stay alive. One of the most poignant relics of his time in Alaska is an SOS note he scrawled on a page torn from a book. SOS. I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. The note, left at the entrance to Bus 142, was a testament to the stark reality that Chris McCandless, who had ventured so confidently into the wild, now faced death alone. In August 1992, approximately 4 months after he first entered the wilderness, Chris McCandless succumbed to starvation. His body was discovered by a group of moose hunters who stumbled upon Bus 142 and found his remains. His journal, photographs, and personal items were later used to piece together the story of his final days. Chris's journey into the Alaskan wilderness, while tragic, was not without moments of beauty and insight. In one of his last writings, he left a powerful message. Happiness is only real when shared. This realization, scrawled in the margins of one of his books, hinted at a shift in his understanding of what he had sought all along. It suggested that amid the solitude and struggle, Chris found clarity, not only in the wildness of nature, but in the importance of human connection and shared experiences. The Alaskan wilderness, indifferent to the hopes and dreams of those who entered it, became Chris's final teacher. It exposed the thin line between aspiration and hubris, showing that while the search for deeper meaning is noble, survival in nature's raw embrace requires more than spirit. It demands preparation, humility, and an acceptance of one's limits. Chapter 4. Survival and Tragedy. By mid-July 1992, Chris McCandless's time in the Alaskan wilderness had transformed from an exhilarating test of self-reliance into a harrowing struggle for survival. The realization that the wilderness was not a romantic, forgiving haven, but an indifferent force of nature became all too apparent. Chris, once full of confidence and driven by an unyielding spirit, now faced the sobering truth of his isolation and diminishing strength. Chris's journal entries from this period reflect a stark change from the hopeful, reflective notes he had made earlier in his journey. The crisp observations of wildlife, his small triumphs in hunting, and moments of awe at the beauty surrounding him were replaced by sparse, urgent descriptions of his weakening condition and his struggle to find enough food. He wrote about his failed attempts to catch game and the toll hunger was taking on his body. His diet had become increasingly meager, relying on whatever small animals he could catch, supplemented by foraged plants and berries. One of the most debated aspects of Chris's story is the role that wild plants played in his decline. He had relied on his limited knowledge of local flora to forage for food, and while he managed to find edible plants like Hedysarum alpinum, wild potato, it is believed that he may have confused it with or inadvertently consumed the seeds of its toxic cousin. Modern analysis suggests that he might have been affected by the plant's seeds containing swainsonine, a toxin that can inhibit the body's ability to metabolize food, leading to severe malnutrition even when calories are consumed. Whether it was this toxin or simply the cumulative effects of an inadequate diet, Chris's health began to fail rapidly. As his body weakened, Chris's ability to gather food and maintain basic survival routines diminished. The physical toll was accompanied by the emotional weight of isolation. The once liberating solitude now closed in around him, transforming his Alaskan adventure from a quest for enlightenment into a desperate fight against the elements. The journal entries from his final days were marked by brevity and an almost clinical detachment as he recorded his declining state. One entry read, "Day 100. Made it this far, but in great distress. Weak, hunger, exhausted." The Teclanica River, which Chris had crossed without incident in April when it was frozen and tame, now became an insurmountable barrier. Swollen by the summer snowmelt, the river roared with icy power, cutting off his route to potential safety. Chris's realization that he was trapped, unable to return to civilization, must have been devastating. The very river that had once been a part of his journey now stood as an impassable wall, sealing his fate in the wild. Chris's last days were spent in increasing solitude and frailty. He took refuge in Bus 142, his final shelter, where he documented his struggle and left behind messages that spoke to his acceptance of what was to come. Among his last writings was an anguished SOS note, penned on a page from one of his books and taped to the door of the bus. It read, "SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you." The note's stark simplicity and plea for help resonate with the vulnerability of a young man who had ventured into the wild with dreams of self-sufficiency, but was now confronting the harsh reality of nature's unforgiving strength. Despite his best efforts to forage and sustain himself, Chris's emaciated body could no longer fight the effects of starvation. His journal entries stopped, the last dated entry indicating he had survived over 100 days in the wilderness, an impressive feat on its own, but one that came with a deadly cost. In late August, a group of moose hunters passing through the Stampede Trail came upon Bus 142 and made the grim discovery. Chris's body, weighing just 67 pounds, lay lifeless in his sleeping bag. The hunters notified authorities, and the story of the young man who had dared to live by his ideals, only to be defeated by the wilderness he revered, began to unfold. The news of Chris McCandless's death sparked widespread attention and debate. Some viewed him as a tragic hero, a seeker of truth who, like so many before him, pushed the boundaries of human experience in pursuit of deeper meaning. Others saw him as naive, even reckless, for venturing into a harsh environment without adequate preparation or knowledge. The polarizing views only intensified as John Krakauer's article in Outside Magazine and subsequent book Into the Wild brought Chris's story to the global stage. Krakauer's investigation into Chris's life and motivations added depth to the narrative, exploring the personal and philosophical questions that had driven Chris into the wild. Was he an inspired idealist, or a misguided youth seeking adventure without fully understanding the risks? The truth likely lay somewhere in between, a complex blend of courage, conviction, and the limitations of human foresight. Amidst the tragedy, Chris McCandless's story left behind a powerful message. His journey, with its moments of joy, hardship, and reflection, spoke to the universal human longing for freedom and meaning. His last written words, found in the margins of a book, resonated with profound insight. Happiness is only real when shared. This realization suggested that even as Chris faced his end, he grasped a truth that went beyond the wilds of Alaska. That life's fulfillment comes not just from solitude or independence, but from the connections we share with others. Chris's death marked the end of his journey, but the legacy of Into the Wild and the debates surrounding his choices have kept his story alive. His life and the way it ended serve as both inspiration and caution, a reminder of the thin line between aspiration and survival. To many, he is a symbol of the risks taken by those who dare to step beyond the familiar in search of a more profound existence, whatever the outcome may be. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Chris McCandless. The story of Chris McCandless did not end with his death in the Alaskan wilderness. Instead, it began a new chapter, one that has resonated deeply with audiences around the world and fueled discussions about the boundaries between idealism and recklessness, the allure of solitude, and the pursuit of meaning in an increasingly complex world. When John Krakauer's book Into the Wild was published in 1996, it brought McCandless's life and final journey to an international audience, transforming his tragic end into a narrative that continues to inspire, provoke, and teach. Chris's story, as Krakauer depicted it, was that of a young man who sought to live by his principles, rejecting the conventions of society and materialism to seek an existence stripped down to its most elemental truths. To some, McCandless was a hero, an embodiment of youthful courage and the timeless human yearning to break free from societal constraints and embrace a life of raw authenticity. His journey spoke to those who felt confined by the expectations of modern life, serving as a reminder that the desire to connect with nature and explore the depths of one's spirit is an impulse as old as humanity itself. For others, however, Chris McCandless's story was a cautionary tale. Critics argued that he was unprepared, naive, and even arrogant for venturing into the Alaskan wilderness without adequate supplies or knowledge. His decision to rely on scant resources and his romanticized view of the wild have been seen as hubris, a miscalculation that ultimately cost him his life. These debates have shaped the way people interpret his actions, creating a dual legacy, one that inspires admiration and another that warns of the dangers of underestimating nature's indifference. Despite the divided opinions, the legacy of Chris McCandless has endured, largely because his story touches on universal themes. The desire to test oneself, to seek enlightenment, and to step beyond the comfortable and known into the unknown is something many can relate to, even if they never take it to the extremes that Chris did. His life has sparked conversations about the nature of adventure and risk, the motivations behind seeking solitude, and the fine line between bravery and recklessness. One of the most profound aspects of McCandless's legacy is the insight it provides into the search for meaning in the modern world. At a time when society is driven by rapid technological advancement and consumer culture, his choice to walk away from material comfort and societal expectations to find peace in the wilderness strikes a chord with those who feel disillusioned by the relentless pace of modern life. His story serves as a reminder that fulfillment is not solely derived from wealth or achievement, but can be found in experiences that challenge the spirit and deepen self-understanding. The publication of Into the Wild and the subsequent film adaptation, directed by Sean Penn in 2007, brought Chris's story to an even wider audience, turning him into a symbol of youthful idealism and a quest for authenticity. The film's portrayal of Chris's journey, coupled with an evocative soundtrack by Eddie Vedder, captured the spirit of his adventure and the profound introspection that characterized his time on the road and in the wilderness. It invited viewers to grapple with their own definitions of freedom and happiness, and to consider what sacrifices they would be willing to make in pursuit of those ideals. Bus 142, the place where Chris spent his final days, became a pilgrimage site for those who were moved by his story. Adventurers, travelers, and seekers from around the world trekked into the Alaskan wilderness to see the fabled bus, leaving messages, tributes, and mementos in honor of Chris and his journey. However, the pilgrimage was not without its dangers. Several rescue missions were launched to assist stranded visitors, and at least 2 individuals lost their lives trying to reach the site. In 2020, the bus was removed by Alaskan authorities to prevent further accidents, but its legacy continues as an artifact that symbolizes both inspiration and caution. Chris's journals, letters, and photos have provided a window into the mind of a young man who was both deeply insightful and flawed, idealistic yet vulnerable. One of his most famous reflections, written near the end of his life, encapsulates the journey that led him to Alaska and the realization he found there. Happiness is only real when shared. This simple statement, scrawled in the margins of a book, suggested that amid the isolation he had sought, Chris came to understand the value of connection and the shared human experience. The duality of Chris McCandless's story, as both an ode to the adventurous spirit and a somber reminder of the risks of ill-prepared exploration, has left a lasting imprint. It challenges those who read his story to question their own motivations, the balance between independence and community, and the line between aspiration and overreach. His story speaks to the dreamer, the philosopher, and the realist alike, showing that the search for meaning is as complex as it is compelling. In the years since his death, Chris McCandless has become more than a historical figure. He has become a symbol of seeking, of longing, and of the inevitable risks that come with stepping off the beaten path. For some, he represents the purity of a life lived according to one's values, no matter the cost. For others, he serves as a reminder that while the call of the wild is enticing, it is also merciless and must be respected. Into the Wild continues to resonate because it touches on the timeless questions of what it means to truly live, how to find fulfillment, and the lengths one might go to in order to understand themselves. Chris McCandless's journey may have ended in the wilderness of Alaska, but his legacy endures, reminding us that the search for meaning is a journey that belongs to us all. Conclusion. Reflections on the journey. The story of Chris McCandless is a tapestry woven with adventure, introspection, and the timeless struggle between the human spirit and nature's unforgiving embrace. His journey from the comfort of an affluent life to the heart of the Alaskan wilderness is both a celebration of independence and a sobering tale of the risks inherent in seeking freedom without limits. Through John Krakauer's Into the Wild, Chris's story has transcended its tragic ending to become a mirror reflecting our own questions about life, fulfillment, and the pursuit of true happiness. Chris McCandless's Odyssey resonates because it speaks to the dualities within all of us: the need for solitude and the longing for connection, the desire for simplicity and the pull of ambition, the courage to challenge the familiar and the sobering consequences of stepping too far into the unknown. His path inspires those who see life as an exploration of boundaries, whether they are the physical limits of the wilderness or the intangible lines that define identity and purpose. His final realization that happiness is only real when shared captures a universal truth that echoes beyond the Alaskan frontier. It suggests that while solitude can bring clarity and nature can cleanse the soul, the essence of life's fulfillment lies in shared moments, relationships, and the bonds that give experiences meaning. This poignant insight, found in the margins of his books, reminds us that the search for oneself is often intertwined with the search for connection. The legacy of Chris McCandless continues to provoke thought and debate. Was he a visionary seeking a more profound existence, or was he a youth blinded by idealism and unprepared for the realities of nature? The answer may be both, and therein lies the complexity of his story. Chris's journey serves as both inspiration and caution, a testament to the enduring spirit of exploration and the importance of understanding the balance between passion and preparedness. For those who dream of adventure and self-discovery, Chris's life is a reminder that the call of the wild is powerful, but must be met with respect, knowledge, and humility. Nature, with all its beauty and majesty, does not bend to human will, and the wilderness, as alluring as it is, holds no forgiveness for those who underestimate it. Yet, his story also speaks to the value of seeking one's path, questioning norms, and striving to live authentically, even when that path defies convention. The abandoned Bus 142, which once served as Chris's final shelter, may no longer stand as a pilgrimage site, but the spirit of what it represented lives on. It is a symbol of both freedom and fragility, a reminder that the quest for meaning is a journey filled with revelations, risks, and, ultimately, the acceptance of life's complexities. Chris McCandless's journey into the wild may have ended in the Alaskan wilderness, but it is a story that continues to unfold in the hearts of those who seek to understand themselves and the world around them. His legacy challenges us to ponder our own lives. What does it mean to live fully? How far are we willing to go in search of truth? And what lessons can we learn from those who dared to chase their ideals, even at great cost? In the end, Into the Wild is more than the tale of one young man. It is an invitation to reflect on our desires, our limits, and the way we choose to engage with the world. It asks us to consider not just the journey of Chris McCandless, but our own journeys, and what we might find when we look beyond the horizon into the wild.